So today we put together a small agenda. We thought we'd start out with kind of a case study of a mid-size institution, lending institution, consumer bank. But that's not to say that these same problems occur at small, medium, and large, just in different capacities. We'll work into risk assessment gaps, which basically is anything that's falling through the cracks, but much needed, and how that will roll right into the impacts that those risk assessment gaps have, both from a regulatory and a practical standpoint. We'll talk about what is a responsibility as a risk manager, and then basically go into a vendor risk management checklist to make sure you're crossing your T's, dotting the I's, getting the most out of your system, getting the most out of your reports. You can click that. So the case study, like I said, we went with a small to medium sized community bank, 125 accounts, about 3 billion in assets and growing, thus the need to amp up the vendor risk management effort. The size of the management group usually ranges from it's somebody's part-time job to 1, 2, maybe 3 max. New vendors onboarded per month at the institution. It could range from 3 to 5, you know, on a high level, high capacity month, maybe 10. Total net number of vendors, we're talking between 200 and 500 vendors that these institutions have to monitor. So it's quite an ambiguous process. You can click that. In terms of risk assessment gaps, from discussions that Michael and I have had, you know, dozens of discussions and hundreds actually of discussions we've had, a lot of it stems from the fact that these institutions, they go out, they buy into a risk management platform, a tech platform, but what they don't realize at the end of the day is what you get out of it is what you put into it. So if you don't have the staff dedicated to maintaining the system, you're just not going to get what you want. You know, we had a call the other day where we asked, and it was a larger bank, and we asked the question, who monitors this whole system for you? And basically the answer was, well, he's sort of just a data input operator. Well, when it comes to audit time and when it comes to reconciliations, that's not going to really help you in any capacity. So, I mean, what that causes is there's just because of the lack of staffing and the lack of expertise, it just creates it's just an insufficient time to request process analysis, recommendations, anything on that due diligence material. So it basically becomes checkbox items. The lack of easy for me to say, specialization to fully understand the material provided, it just becomes cumbersome because they may understand the financial side, but not the cyber. They may understand reputation valuations, but not the cyber, not the financial. So the specialization is a huge factor. They're accepting materials as face value. So basically they're getting a question, they're getting back a questionnaire, so to speak, and taking that vendor's word that it's filled out correctly and not actually doing the due diligence on that vendor. They've just checked boxes, and these vendors know how to answer those questions to get them through the process. The lack of staff, it creates missed deadlines, just forcing delays and unwanted extensions of contracts. So those basically autofills and those auto renewals, they come into play. So you may not be in love with a vendor, you may want to roll over, but unfortunately you missed that auto renewal, and you're I'll use the word stuck with them for another year. You're forced to triage annual due diligence. I'm gonna replace the word triage with scramble to get that due diligence done. The due diligence, we like to refer to it as a picture in time. So what you have a year from the original contract implementation may not be what's in existence currently. So you really want to stay on top of those things. Negotiating for new contracts and incorporating the appropriate risk management clauses, that's huge and impactful to a company. And all these just sum up. I mean, it's going to create loss. You lose the leverage over your vendors. And, you could get into some regulatory situations that you don't want to be in. So you can click that slide. I'll let
as Eric mentioned, I mean, these different issues, right? It's not just smart to have a good vendor risk management program. There's actual laws on this, right? The OCC, for example, we know has a variety of different policies in place. Going back to some of these, for example, I think back in 2013 or 2014, where they actually took the time to say, you need to have an effective third-party vendor risk management program in place to help evaluate your risk, right? And they've made different changes to this, small, maybe clarifying changes over the years. But last year, as we probably all remember, there were quite a few ransomware attacks. For example, Colonial Pipeline was a big one, among others, right? SolarWinds, which used basically someone's software, the update mechanism in their software, to basically infiltrate all these different systems, both in government and in business. And those were, I believe, groups linked to Russia at the time. And the government decided or realized that there's probably a lot of cyber risk or cybersecurity incidents that have basically gone unreported. And so what we see is some changes that they've put in place last year. And in fact, I believe this most recent one here is going into effect May 1st of this year. So 2 months and change, which is if you have a cybersecurity incident that basically causes any kind of degradation to your systems by 4 or more hours, you have 36 hours to notify your regulator as well as customers. And so now suddenly a lot of banks or other businesses that may have tried to kind of sweep this stuff under the rug are now going to have to disclose that they've had an incident. And we know some of these hacking groups have gotten very savvy over the years. You know, originally they might have gotten into your system, done the ransomware trap, and said, pay us $50 million to get the key back or something, right? Well, if you're a bank and you only have $3 million on cash on hand, for example, you don't have the 50. There's no way you can pay it. And so a lot of these hacking groups now, what they do is they wait, right? They wait months. They're rummaging around your system. They're looking at your financial statements. They're looking for, you know, if maybe you're another kind of business, they're looking for trade secret type material. They're going to rummage around in your system. I think it's about 260 days is the average before you basically become aware of their existence in their system. And it's usually at their choosing when you find out that they're there. But what they're doing is they're looking through and saying, well, gee, you only have 3 million cash on hand, for example. We're not going to ask for 50 million because we know if we ask for that, you probably can't pay it. And therefore, we're not going to get paid. And you're more likely to go to law enforcement over it, for example. So what are we going to do? They're going to ask for like $100,000 or something. They get a little something, and you're more likely to pay it, and it's more likely to be swept under the rug. And that's in part why we see some of these new regulations that are coming out related to multi-factor authentication and cybersecurity incident notification, which is what this new rule is in place for. Which again, that starts May 1st of this year. So it's just something that we all have to be aware of and it's really going to start, I think, changing the nature of the risk landscape and how much it's going to start having spill down effects, for insurance and other things like that, reputational, et cetera. So it's really important that banks and other institutions kind of get their house in order to deal with something like this. If you can go to the next slide. So whether the market is expanding or contracting, if it is contracting, for example, and there may be budget cuts, for example, that actually puts more pressure on vendor management, because hacking groups and other things like that, they don't operate on a bank's cyclical cycle. They know that maybe you have banks or others that might have a planned security update, or they're switching to a new server, or they're updating their firewall or whatever. Now suddenly maybe they don't have the budget for it, or they're going to delay it or something like that. And so they're smart enough to know that there might be an opening here. And we also know that about 63% of all cyber attacks originate through a company's third-party vendor. And so that's why, we like to bring this up, because, these cybersecurity incidents could have a significant impact on your bottom line and the reputation of the company. Because, not being in compliance or other incidents could lead to some sort of enforcement action. It could, obviously, as I mentioned, reputational. You may not have enough insurance to cover costs to recover. Obviously there's loss of revenue, possible lawsuits. The average cost to recover from a cybersecurity incident is around $5 to $6 million. And so if you don't have a sufficient policy to cover that, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, we've seen stuff at VentureLink where we're looking at insurance documents for companies, for example, that handle consumer personal identifiable information, and they don't have cyber insurance, a cyber policy at all, right? That's a red flag. If they have, if they're holding your customers' data and they don't have a cyber policy, or maybe they do have one, but it's, a very low amount. And depending on what that is, maybe that's good enough. But if they don't even have a cyber policy, well, guess what? That stuff's not going to get covered at all. And at some point, the costs of that are going to probably roll back up to you. And so not being prepared for these kinds of things is, as we like to say, preparation for failure. And so it becomes really important that we are ready for that. In terms of a checklist, what we recommend is, having all your stakeholders be aware of the risks and rewards working with a particular vendor. And the key to managing that risk is consistency and follow through, right? If you have a policy that says we're going to do annual due diligence or quarterly or whatever it might be, but you don't have those resources to actually do it, that failure shifts liability back to you, right? So whether you're assessing a vendor for the first or 50th time, you get your references, you verify that relationship. As best you can, you determine if the vendor is solvent. We have, there's tools out there that can help you, because we know companies are oftentimes reluctant to share financial information. Obviously, publicly traded companies, that's more easily attainable. But a lot of these privately held companies like to keep that very close to the vest. But there are tools you can do to get that, whether that's business or financial monitoring or credit checks, things like that. There's ways to get that information. Do they have the appropriate types of insurance for the coverage of the work that needs to be done? Have they taken all of the appropriate, or they have all the appropriate licenses to do the work? Can they meet your SLA needs? And determine, if they've implemented the necessary cybersecurity policies to meet your own organization's needs and requirements. Because if they aren't doing that, right, then that could create a vulnerability there. Eric, I don't, okay. So as a risk manager, it is your role to both educate yourself about the different foreseeable threats to the organization, but also to take the appropriate proactive steps to mitigate any potential risk or identified risk. And there's things that we can do that we know about, right? If you want to avoid a serious data breach, there's the zero trust model, right? Where you only give companies that very narrow specific piece of information they need, right? If they just need the zip code for your consumers, for example, there's no reason to give them the full address, right? They just need the zip code. That's all they should get. Things like that. You know, use routine monitoring to continuously reassess the risk posed by that vendor. You'll avoid surprises by that, right? You know, if you're getting alerts about what's going on with that company, that's a huge help, especially as you go down and you are in contract negotiation periods. Have the contract owners provide those routine updates on the performance of the vendor, as well as any changes to that relationship, right? Maybe you onboarded them a year or two ago, and they were to do one thing, and over time, their role has expanded, right? And they're doing more things than you anticipated before. And that needs to be reevaluated. That needs to be taken into account. Do they have access to more data than they did before? Are we giving them more data? Has the value of the contract simply changed, right? Is it just a bigger contract than it was before? They moved from a tier 3 to a tier 2, or a tier 2 to a tier 1, or whatever it might be, right? In terms of the risk. Keeping that vendor engaged, right? Where you can, work in due diligence reviews and compliance in terms of in the contract. If you can work that into the contract, that's the best. And keep that going, right? If you rarely or intermittently ask for due diligence documentation, then they're not going to think that you take it very seriously, because that's what they see, right? But if you keep them engaged and they know it's coming, or if it's in the contract to compel them to provide reasonable information, reasonably requests to respond to those kinds of reasonable requests, that way at least you've got some leverage there to help you. And of course, the more mundane stuff, right? Managing those contract dates and vendor compliance, and get that feedback and use that to help you manage those contracts and make recommendations on the terms of those agreements, because that all can roll together and help you manage those agreements and that relationship. So go back one. I'll let Eric go.
You want me to take this, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll take that first one. So venture link management. We help companies get in regulated industries manage risks by providing active and comprehensive risk assessment insight into their vendor network. So what does that mean? You coming out of the gate, you have all this information, but there's nobody there to dissect it, to make sense out of it, to make it comprehensible, to make it a grade level letter and numerical grade of where you are. And what we do is we create the reports to put you in a defensible position. So in that capacity, that's where we add value. So you could have this well-oiled machine, but if you don't have the insight and the specialty to generate a report that makes sense at an audit level, at a due diligence level, at a board meeting level, then it's just a machine. You want to take the next one, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, part of what we do at VentureLink, you know, we help our clients with, you know, continuous monitoring, whether that's cyber, whether that's financial and business, whether that's supply chain, like nth party, when you want to look down and see what is truly in your ecosystem, right? I mean, we all know, we've seen it. They say, show me your fourth party vendors. And they give you a list of, we don't have any. Or Microsoft. Great, they're using Office, right? But we come in there and we can help you review it. We have the specialists to actually help review this different material. In fact, we use former or retired military intelligence analysts to help review, for example, SOC reports and other material, which, hey, they provided it, looks interesting, I guess it's okay. You can move beyond that, and you can be able to have us come in there and say, actually, this isn't good, or it could be a lot better. And these are the kinds of questions that you need to go back to this vendor with and say, I need you to provide X, Y, or Z, or explain to me how this works. We can drill down and provide that for you, calibrating it to your requirements, or we can just go with kind of what the military uses, and in terms of how they interact with different, in terms of their military grade type requirements for cybersecurity. And we all know that with what's going on right now in Ukraine and with Russia, there's a very real chance that, given the asymmetry between Russia and the United States in sort of economic sanctions, for example, we sanction their banks. Well, they can't sanction ours because no one really trades in rubles, but they can launch a cyber attack against US banks, for example, as a counterattack. There's things like that that are very real, and they could really happen. And so, knowing whether or not, your systems may be up to snuff, are your vendors up to snuff? These different groups, especially a lot of them are in fact based in Russia, like the Rebel Group and some of these others that were responsible for like SolarWinds and the Colonial Pipeline and other things like that. We have to take into account that these are kind of, precursors to perhaps larger events. So having those kinds of specialists on hand to look through this stuff and help provide that feedback to you, to help you drill down and figure out what is the risk, what are we really dealing with here, do we need to make a change, or how can we compel this vendor to make a change. And so we provide that. We help provide that. We help you understand, plan, and mitigate these kinds of risks, especially in this kind of fast changing environment, which is a lot faster than I think a lot of us expected. But yeah, that's just, it's what we do. And we look forward to meeting with any of you all here on our call today. And certainly if you have any questions, we're happy to take them about what we do or how we can help, or just a general question overall. And I'll let Eric make the last offer here. So
yeah, the shameless used car salesman. Thank you. So as a preferred TMC member, like Michael said, what we do is we come in, we'll do a discovery call. All our services are a la carte. So with that, we will customize a solution for you that meets your pain points. We don't come in and try and tell you how to run your program, your tech. We're completely agnostic. So whatever system you have, we work within that system to create reports. And again, to put you in a better position, a defensible position. And like I said, as a TMC member, we can offer a 10% discount on any of our services. And just keep in mind, like I said, it's a la carte. You pick and choose how you want to go forward to create those solutions. If there's any questions, or can open it up.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. Well, I did have one question about just the cadence of the review. I know that if you're onboarding a new vendor, that would certainly be, you want to review the documentations and the answers to the RFP and things like that. But what would be the cadence of reviewing the vendors that you've already onboarded and have used for years?
Well, a couple of things that you can do and that we can help with, for example, certainly there's the annual due diligence, where you actually take the time to review the material. Again, get a refresh of whatever the vendor has, because things change, right? A SOC report that's more than 12 months old, things change, right? So we need to see a bridge letter. If one doesn't exist, or if they don't provide a SOC report, but they're getting PII and they don't have cyber insurance, that's a problem. So we like to be able to, we recommend at least that annual review. Other things that we've recommended or we've seen done also, is, and I mentioned it earlier, providing those routine performance reviews of your vendors, right? So those could be like, for example, quarterly. This is more of an internal kind of review, but business monitoring, financial monitoring, we can go ahead and provide that weekly, daily. We can narrow that down as close to real time as you want. But we do recommend that internally, that these assessments, or at least are they meeting your SLAs? Are they complying with your requirements in the contract? Because that openness in terms of with the contract manager, you don't want a setup where, gee, the contract, the owner of this contract in your company, for example, the department head or whoever it might be, they suddenly become best friends with this company or a particular person there, and that kind of leads to bias, right? In terms of, well, he's a really nice guy, or whatever. You always try and do the right thing, or bias or whatever. But if they're not, at the end of the day, actually complying with the terms of your agreement, or they are opaque in terms of what they're willing to disclose to you, you do need an independent, or at least to be able to share that, right? You can keep that objectivity if your business owners know, we're going to keep asking about this. You need to continually to assess this vendor, as well as using other tools. We offer business monitoring and cyber monitoring and all that, and we can go in there and look at this and say, they just laid off 3,000 people and their financials maybe don't look too good right now. Those kinds of changes, or maybe they're doing really well, but if they're suddenly closing offices or things like that, and their business health is considered to be poor, or they're really late at paying their vendors, things like that, allows you to start asking questions, or at least taking the right kinds of steps internally, and to start asking around. Hey, are they late? Or we have a development project, we're working with them. Are they keep pushing the deadline because they're not paying their vendors on time, it looks like? So is it delaying our projects because of this, right? Are they just short on cash, basically? So those kind of things help you. The more consistent we are, or you can be on that, or the more real time you can get with some of these things, the more accurate and more actionable you can have that. So, we can do it daily, monthly, quarterly, whatever fits your needs. If you're not sure, we'll work with you. I mean, that's part of what Eric mentioned in terms of our discovery call. We're going to help you guys say, maybe you guys this should be something maybe quarterly based on what you're telling us, or things like that, or this should be done every week or every 2 weeks or every month, or something like that, and then work with you, explain why, and what that value can bring to your organization, to have that and to keep you in a defensible position, if the regulators ever come knocking.
And then you mentioned that a couple of times when the regulators come knocking. So they're here, right? So they're
Oh, yeah.
they're here. They're at the door. They are starting an audit process. So those reports that you have provided, they're something that they can just say, like, here's what we've done, and here's what VentureLink has
Oh,
done
yeah.
and found for us, and here's how does that process work? The,
Yeah, if, audit, auditors are gonna, they may ask, okay, what are you doing? How are you doing this? What's your policy? And, if your policy is, oh, we do this per year, and then, okay, well, show us some of these reports. Or let's, and the ones you have are all 2 or 3 years old, right? Well, that means you're not even following your own policy. But what we can help you do is, because we can provide, we can key this in directly into a system that you may have. We can do the write-ups on, or both, whatever's preferred. And we can provide that to you, so that way when a regulator asks, you'll have that. You'll be able to say, okay, here's this product that shows this is the annual due diligence review. This is how much we've covered. That included the cyber, it included the business, financial, reputational, dependencies, whatever it might be. We've gone through, we've evaluated it, came back as a moderate risk or a high risk. And because of that, we asked these questions, and these are the responses we got back from that vendor. That shows that you are doing your due diligence, and that you take it seriously, and you'll be able to hopefully avoid any negative outcome in terms of with a regulator, because now you've got these documents. It's
Right.
what you're doing is defensible, because you've taken these steps to be able to help manage this risk.
It's actionable items that
Oh yeah,
nobody wants, but everybody has to know about.
yeah, exactly.
For sure. Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. VentureLink is definitely a valued partner with the Mortgage Collaborative. So thank you guys for being with us today. Appreciate all the information that you've provided. Once again, as a follow-up, there will be an email that comes out tomorrow with a link to this video, and possibly the deck. We can attach that as well. And we'll also include Eric and Michael's contact information. So really
Okay.
do appreciate it. As always, we appreciate you guys stopping by with TMC Connect today. We know that everyone is super busy. So appreciate your time. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and
Thank you so much.
and
Thank
for
you,
anyone that's
TMC.
going to be there in Miami, we'll be there. So
Yes, yes.
So-
Miami,
so,
join us there.
yeah.
VentureLink will be doing a lightning showcase with Verity Global. So please join us in the lightning showcase for their session. Very
Thank
much
you so much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.